welcome back to another episode of the BOPS podcast. My name is Maryan, and we are today hosted in the Solano Community College Film Studio, and I'm here joined by my co-hosts, Dime, Tianeh, and Bria. And for today's episode, we will be talking about the social aspects of being a first-generation American. So first, we're going to go in order and talk about our ethnic backgrounds because while we are not all first-generation Americans, getting to know us, our ethnic backgrounds, our different experiences growing up could be important. So first, my parents are African. My dad is from Somalia and my mom is Kenyan, and they immigrated here in 1999 for medical school residency, and ever since then, they've been living here. They came with a student visa at first, I believe, and then after they finished schooling, they got their green card. So yeah.
Cool. I love your parents. They're really sweet and impressive.
I love you.
Oh my god. Okay. Okay. So for me, I found out I'm like completely white, just different versions of white. We got Irish, German, Danish, Europe. That's about it. And I found out last year during a school project for history that my mom's side of the family at some point goes down 13 generations of American, which I like.
That's interesting.
It's weird to think about. And then I think my dad's family is probably like Irish immigrants around the same time, probably.
Okay, so my parents are from Iran. They both immigrated here in, I believe, the 1980s after the Iranian Revolution of 1979. And both of them got student visas at first to attend school here, and they obviously eventually got their green cards and became citizens. So yeah.
My family, we aren't immigrants. We're actually descendants from slaves. So we think we're like West African, but there's no way of knowing
Right.
where exactly we're from. So I always say that I'm from California.
And because of that, do you feel like you kind of lost touch with your roots or your culture? But I do know that with slavery, they created their new own culture, like soul and all that stuff. So if you want to go more into depth with that, that would be actually really interesting.
Oh, for sure. Like, I've definitely become more comfortable with just having, like, seeing myself as, like, Black or African American, depending on how you want to call yourself.
Yeah.
I prefer Black. And it is kind of shocking at first when you're, like, young and you realize, oh, my culture isn't actually, like, my own. It's, like, a new development that came from a really horrible time. But I will say that Black culture in America is one that is based in community and like family, and we have a lot of good food and a lot of good music. So I really can't complain that much.
Yeah, I mean, like, this actually, I don't know if this is going to sound insensitive, but growing up, I was always really jealous of the African American Black culture over here in America because where we're growing up right now, there's not a lot of African people. So I felt like I kind of lost sense with my culture where I didn't, like, really know anything about it, really. Like, I would go back to Africa. I think I went twice in my childhood, like, when I was younger. So I didn't really, like, grow up connected to that, for example, because also my parents are from different cultures. Actually, my parents weren't supposed to get married because, like, back home, you're supposed to marry within your culture, and my parents married, like, from outside. So I think when they were raising me, they were kind of confused. Because my dad, he speaks a different language from my mom. So then I just ended up learning English. But then whenever I go back home to like Africa, which I will be going this summer, which is pretty exciting, I don't know how to speak any language. So I just kind of feel like American, which I am, but I wish I grew up with more of a close sense to my culture, if that makes sense.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And I feel like you bring up like an interesting point. Like, you are Black immigrated from Africa, and like I'm Black immigrated from here. So in a way, we do kind of still have a bit of solidarity, like in Blackness and like Americanized Blackness.
Yeah.
But I actually kind of want to open the floor to Tianeh because I feel like you kind of have an interesting perspective as like a Persian coming from a Persian family, and like at the very least in our area, you don't see many people of that ethnic background.
Yeah, that's true. And I think to address this topic, I also have to talk about my childhood. So I grew up in Southern California. And for those who don't know, Southern California is basically the hub of Persians. Like if you look at like a map of the population of the Iranian diaspora, most of them are in Los Angeles. So that when I was growing up in Southern California in my childhood, I was surrounded by not only non-family members who were Persian, but also I had a bunch of Persian family members. So we'd see them a lot. They talk Farsi. I spoke Farsi as a child. I didn't really speak English until I went to school. And then when I moved here, I lost a lot of that. And that was also a time when I was going through puberty, middle school, and all the like peer pressure to conform. And unfortunately, I lost a lot of that culture that I had been surrounded by from when I was a child. And looking back on it now, I truly regret not appreciating what I had and not trying to stay connected like you were talking about, like making an effort. Because as of now, while I still understand Farsi, I've lost the ability to speak it very well. So it's just, and I want to continue that. I want to share my culture with my kids. So I know right now I have to make an effort to learn before it's too late.
Exactly. Dime, anything to add?
Oh, I was just thinking, like, it's one of those things where unless with, like, not Farsi, Persian culture and then the Black American culture, it's hard to really get into unless you're born into it or brought into it. When your parents move to a hub of a specific culture, like it's going to be easily accessible. But then as a kid, if they move you out, it's so hard to keep those connections because you're a child. And then also your parents immigrated. They probably also didn't have access to a lot of Black culture in America. And if they did, it was probably very different from any Black culture that they experienced.
I will say that like the Black culture here is very different from the Black culture back home in Africa. It varies very differently. I feel like over here, this might be a general statement, but they focus a lot on like maybe expressing yourself through like music, food, movies, the way you act, the way you dress over here. But back home, I feel like it's more families really like put on religion a lot. The culture there where like the man is like the head of the household and like the woman does like all the cooking and cleaning, that's like really focused on back home over there. But also I remember I would talk to my parents about it. Actually, this happened the other day where I was like, why didn't you guys teach me Swahili, or why didn't you guys teach me a Somali? Because like I want to be connected to my culture. I want to know this stuff. I mean, I don't even really know how to cook cultural foods, and I feel like that sucks because when I grow up, like Tianeh was saying, I want to be able for my children to experience their culture and experience that like warmth of that, because like whenever I have my mom's food, I'm like I feel connected to my culture, and I'm afraid that I won't be able to do that with my children. And this might sound really insensitive, but they'll just be American.
I understand where you're coming from, and it's interesting that you talk about like, because the way I see it, and this might not be true, but I don't know if a lot of Africans in Africa see themselves as Black. Like the same way that I don't believe like Asians in Asia see themselves as Asian. Like it's just like we as Americans, because we're such a diverse country, and the history of race in this country has led it to be that differentiating between people is the norm. I'll say that. It's
necessary to like survive. You have to be like, you have to fight for yourself.
You have to identify as something.
Right.
Yeah.
And so much of America is, or the U.S. specifically, is identity, when
We're all just
it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really
I mean, it matters to self, but it's not, it doesn't have to be a necessity.
It just is to separate us. But although if we weren't separated by race, I know back home, when I'm referring to home, I'm referring to Africa, because like that's where my roots are from. There's like, I think, differences with like tribes and like, I guess, country that you're from. Like
Also, religion is a big
is
thing.
also, yeah.
You know what? That's interesting though, because like in Black culture in America, it's like we have very similar. Although I think a lot of cultures have like patriarchal households, family as the base, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
But as opposed to like where like the African religions are very spiritual and like have a different outlook on like higher powers and stuff.
Yeah.
With Black American culture, it's like the religion is Christianity mainly. It's mainly Christian Baptist. That's what I am, and of course that comes from the fact that the slaves brought over from Africa were raised and taught to read from the Bible. Those who were taught to read, of course, and they were forced, for lack of a better word, to go to the white churches, and so that's why like, and that kind of hits me hard too sometimes, because who knows what I would have believed in had we still had like had the culture from wherever we came from. Like it's how do I say this?
Frustrating.
It is frustrating, and I can see how it can be frustrating for both our sides. How it can be frustrating for you to like coming into an American culture, kind of being stuck in the in-between, having African ancestry and then American, having an American life, and then wanting to reach back to the other part. But then it's also then frustrating for people like me, who it's like we don't even know where to start with stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's like we kind of have to make the most of what we have here, but so much of what we have here is either based on what we've learned through slavery, or there's just a lot of bad that came to with what our culture became.
I just wanted to add to that as something in my personal experience is my parents always tell me about how like the Iran they grew up in is not the Iran it is now. And that's also another reason that I haven't been back, because the culture just isn't the same. That's not how they grew up. And right now, with the religion that we identify as, we're not welcome there. And that's just unfortunate, because like I do eventually want to go back. I want to experience like the place where my parents grew up. But just the fact that they keep telling me that it's not the same place. It's just so sad, because like in some alternate timeline there could have been like the ability for me to go like see that and see like how they grew up, and it's just like just sucks.
Yeah.
I was thinking when you guys were talking about how American Black culture is so different from African Black culture, technically because it's not even Black culture. It is. I mean, you're Black people who have culture, but it's more.
It's different.
It's very different, and I think that's because in America, Black culture was like a defense mechanism, or not necessarily a defense mechanism, but it all comes from our identity was stripped away from us. This is the little that we have. Let's use it. They had the Bible to learn English from. A lot of soul food comes from like the bad parts of animals, because that's all they were given from their slaveholders. And it's like it's unfortunate that had to happen in the first place, and they were stripped away from so much in the first place. But I think there's also beauty in the regrowth of that culture.
For sure. I think any culture, any people who are able to make something out of nothing is something to respect and something to appreciate.
Highly impressive.
Of course. And we are, I mean, of course, I'm very blessed to live in the place where I live and have a good family, a family that wasn't destroyed, because, any minority group who was living in America pretty much, I mean, forever, let's be honest.
Yeah.
What I'm getting to is like the drugs crisis. That's what came to my mind.
Honestly, before the 60s, your life is gonna.
It just wasn't, and
specifically over from the start.
The drug crisis did a lot to destroy the cultures, specifically the Black community, but also like the Chinese American community. Just so many of us were being attacked by the country that we were trying to survive in, and I think it's horrible to think about the history and to know that that's something that happened and what ruined so many people's households. But at the same time, I think it's very unifying, and there's been like a lot of talk recently on like the web about like POC solidarity, and I personally won't get into that, but I think it is important to notice that there are things that do bring us together. And things like that, where we should all look to that and be like, this is something horrible that happened, but it's something we all experience together. And that kind of unity, I mean, I go out to Oakland or Sacramento, Sacramento or like LA, or visiting like family who come from Georgia, and even just looking at other Black people on the street, like, it's like, oh hey sis, how you doing? Like, hey bro, how you doing? Like, there's just that family community aspect that I really, really find comfort in, that I don't know I would have if I was a person of another race. So that's something I do appreciate, I guess I could say.
I actually would like to add something onto that. I think just the community that you have with people who have like speak the same language or are from the same, I guess, country that you're from. It's just like, for example, for me, like when my parents see like Persian people, or when the few times they hear people speaking Farsi, they always try to make an effort to go and talk to them and like try to make friends, because there's just like, there's strength in numbers, and there's so like few of us in Northern California at least, that it's just like, it's nice to have somebody.
Nice to have that. Somebody understand like the same cultural experiences, I guess, because like, I mean, you could talk about like the different foods you eat, or like maybe the way that your parents were raised that determines the way that they act now, or how they raise you, and you could talk about that with them, just like connecting with on different cultural aspects with somebody else is like really comforting and nice.
And this isn't completely what we're talking about, but languages and the way they connect people that's so amazing to me. Like, I've always wanted to learn like as many languages as I can like keep in my brain, because that is what connects people. Like you said, when you hear someone speaking the same language as you that you wouldn't expect on the street, it's like, oh my God, like you can just tell how it completely lights up people's life. Like,
it's something you have in common now.
Right. It's like, it's one of those things too that is so deep rooted. Like, I'm not Hispanic, but I do know a bit of Spanish, and so I use it often when I work. And most people will look at me, see that I'm not Hispanic, and then feel like they're forced to speak English. And then when I respond like, oh no, I speak a little Spanish, I can help you. You can just see it completely makes their day, knowing not only that this conversation that they're having is going to be easier, but also knowing that someone went out of their way to learn more about that person's culture. Like, that's really, I think, important. And more kids like in America and California should be taught like languages better, really.
I think with languages other than English, a lot of languages are deeply rooted in culture. Like, they go hand in hand with culture. But the thing with English is, since English is like a universal language, there's no like culture associated with English. So I think that's the difference. Like, when you learn a language other than English, you're also learning the culture associated with that language. But English is kind of just English.
I think a large part of me regrets that I didn't like actually learn Spanish from our Spanish classes, and I know a little bit, but what I know while I'm working, I feel so bad like when I have to tell a person nobody here speaks Spanish. We have coworkers who do, or I have coworkers who do speak Spanish, but a lot of the times when there is a person who's like Espanol, there's not that, and I have to use like, first I'm like, uno momento, go ask, hey, does anyone speak Spanish? Usually it's no, and be like, lo siento, no hablo español. And then I just struggling, hearing them struggle to speak English, I just feel bad. Because it's like,
I know, I get what you're saying, and it's one of those things too that I don't think people, maybe, I don't know if it's that popular, but when I see someone else from a different country or a different culture trying to learn English, I also get really excited in a way, because again, English is the only thing I've ever known for the longest time. And so like, I am planning to go to Japan soon for college, as we know.
You're forced to now. I'm forcing you to go.
And so I'm connecting with a bunch of people who are native Japanese and just trying to learn more Japanese and learn more also about the area that I'm going to be living in. And so my language teacher's daughter, my language teacher's daughter's friend.
I was like, why are you repeating this? I understood what you said.
I had to make sure I had the point. But my language teacher's daughter's friend and I have started talking, and she speaks mostly Japanese.
Does she live in Japan?
Yes,
they live in Japanese.
They live in Osaka, and so she's learning English right now as I'm learning Japanese.
Oh, so you guys are like conversating.
There's a lot of like not a lot of schools, but I hear, like online here, where kids learning one language. I think you guys had to do this in your French class. They have pen pals
Oh, yes.
from whatever country they're learning a language from. And I think that's so cool that, like, there's that connection.
One thing I do want to talk about is that I feel like, okay, America is the only place where, like, we start learning another language. Well, actually, I don't know this for sure. But from what my parents tell me, America is the only place that, like, focuses on learning another language in high school to meet some graduation requirement. Because also, my parents grew up in a place that was colonized. But other than that, they had to start learning English since they were, like, in primary school, which I guess is, like, our elementary school, and they had to learn it up until they got to college, and they had to be, like, fluent in that. Unlike us, who, I mean, we don't really have to be fluent, we just have to pass the class.
Yeah, which is unfortunate.
I can relate to that because my parents, when they were in school in Iran, they learned Arabic and they also learned English. And I think that also has to do with the fact that English is the universal language. So if you learn English, you're going to get places because basically everywhere speaks English these days.
Yeah.
And even my grandma, who grew up in India, she grew up speaking English. And Gujarati.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of people just... It's just English.
I mean, literally in places like, I know for a fact, South Korea, in Japan, and I believe some Southern American countries, but I can't be for sure on that. They do, like, on their exams to, like, get into good colleges, they have to know fluent English. And that's another setback, and we'll talk about education later. But to how, you know, America treats other cultures, like, I mean, we can thank Great Britain for the fact that we're having a conversation in
About
English
this.
right now.
Right.
Yeah.
But the fact that we, as such a diverse country, still don't make an effort to really implement, like, I feel like as Californians, at the very least, Spanish should be a language that we are taught from elementary or
Yeah, for
kindergarten
sure.
all the way up. Like, people in California should be able to know how to speak fluent Spanish just based on the population that a lot of us, majority of us, are natives, either Mexican, Hispanic, or native Spanish speakers in some level, way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And I think that just all kind of circles back to systemic racism in a way, because by, like, America likes to put themselves on a pedestal, and by putting themselves on that pedestal, they're like, everyone has to speak English. If you don't speak English, we don't care. We're not going to try to accommodate you. You have to accommodate us.
Right.
So that's kind of like the standard right now,
Yeah.
is that you guys have to work to be
You have to
like
work
us.
twice as hard just
Yeah.
to experience the same things. And that goes beyond just, like, verbal language. A lot of ASL people or deaf people, like, they aren't taught ASL. They're just told to get hearing aids and just be normal. And a lot of people, they make the assumption that deaf people can just, like, read lips, when reading lips is probably incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, oh, you can't read lips when you're deaf? Like,
No.
isn't that supposed to be the skill?
Did they come with a
No.
superpower?
Because even though we can hear what people are saying, I can't read lips. Even though I get the extra assistance of, like...
Because if you never heard what those words sound like in the first place, how are you supposed to know what it looks like?
It's just pattern recognition, but so
Yeah.
much of speaking is just opening your mouth over and over again.
Speaking?
And one
Sorry.
wrong thing. No, you're good. One movement can look like a billion other movements.
Speaking of systemic racism and America putting themselves on a pedestal, I just want, since we're talking about the social aspects of growing up here in America, I just want to talk about how, especially before I was, like, ingrained on social media, and especially TikTok, this is going to sound really bad, but I was kind of not ashamed, but I didn't want to talk about my culture, because I feel like in elementary school, like, everybody's like, oh my god, I'm from Britain. I'm from Finland.
I'm from Ireland.
And I was like, that is so cool. I want to be like that. So I would like tell people that I'm like, oh my god, I'm like a little bit British. I'm not. I would just try to, like, fit in. And it wasn't until, like, I saw people, like, embracing their culture on social media, which is really bad, where I started feeling proud about my culture. Like, I'm proud to be from Africa. I'm proud to be part of that. But when I was younger, I was not.
It's sad that so many people of color and just immigrant people are like told to feel ashamed of their culture, not because they're outright told to be ashamed, but because like all the media you consume before
And
that
assimilation.
is all just processed things.
White.
Yeah.
Like I think of like some representation that we had growing up was Jesse with Ravi. And that itself was so
Stereotypical.
typical.
Yeah.
There was this one episode that I saw talked about recently where they did, I think it was just a small part of the video where they all dressed up in Indian clothing. I don't know the proper words. And everyone was in authentic, maybe not authentic, but like it looked authentic. They were
Like a
all in
sari?
authentic
Like
looking
cultural
costumes.
clothing.
Yeah. And then Ravi's looking like the evil dude from Aladdin. He's like dressed up like Jafar. And it's like that's not
funny.
even that's the one person who's that's actual culture, and then it's just
You completely just messed that
you're
up.
just making them wear a costume that's inappropriate for one, and like that's what you're telling kids. I don't know.
Yeah. And like going off of what Maryan was saying, like being ashamed of your culture, like I can completely relate to that. Because like, for example, like referencing when I moved from Southern California to Northern California, that was in 6th grade. And then where I moved to originally, it was a very predominantly white area. Like not cultured white, like white. Like
There's
like American white.
white.
And like actually there was this one time where this is referencing like a racial stereotyping or whatever. This kid asked me like, why are you so dark? Because everybody was so white. And I'm just like,
Girl, you're not even dark. You're
Couldn't tell
caramel.
ya.
so and I'm like,
you're maple.
I couldn't tell you, man. So it's just like things like that, like, and that happened in 6th
It
grade
makes
too.
you feel bad.
Yeah.
It's also like you saying what you said before. It just reminded me so much of like my elementary school experience and like the day that I realized, oh, I need to code switch, because I feel like when you're young, and you know, if you live in like an ethnic household, there's a way you speak to your family, especially with Black people. I mean, you hear how we talk all over the internet now because it's like a joke or a mockery. But in actual households, there are, you know, we do use certain words and that kind
Like
of
slang.
language. And
It's its own
it's
dialect.
called slang. We use AAVE, African American Vernacular English.
Yes.
And I mean, like in my own house, when I get comfortable with my cousins or with my dad or with, you know, my family, I don't talk like the way I'm talking right now because that's what's more comfortable for me.
Yeah.
But when I was in, I believe, I want to say like 2nd grade or 3rd grade, I was talking, I had, so silly when I'm thinking about it now, but we had to write a story about like our family or something. And so in my family, our term for wrestling was jacking. Like, so if you just wrestled with someone, they just jacked you up. And so I had written on my paper that my family, like, I think it was like my sister and I, my sister had jacked me up. That's what I wrote. Not thinking about what that might sound like to someone who doesn't understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it
But
was
also-
3rd grade. Let me finish.
Yeah.
But I had, so I written that, and I was standing in front of the class, and I read this aloud, and the teacher stopped me as soon as I said that and was like, you can't say that in class. And she admonished me in front of the whole class, being like, that's inappropriate, you can't say things like that. And she pulled me aside and made me sit in timeout. And I was so confused because I didn't understand why I was getting in trouble for saying that I wrestled with my family. Lo and behold, you know, that those words have a different, people understand them differently than I do. And I think it was that day where I'm like, oh my God, like there is a difference between the way between me and like my peers. Because everyone else in the class was like, oh my goodness, because I think at that point I was the only Black girl in that class. And to this day, I don't think she ever like realized what happened or like apologized to me. I love that teacher, by the way. I have no problems with her. But I will just never forget that moment when she stood me up in front of the class and was like, that is so inappropriate. But it's true, you know. We can't, for better or worse, we can't be the way we are at home with other people because they don't really get it. And even worse nowadays, they think they get it,
but they don't.
They really don't.
And they just mess up the pronunciation.
Mm-hmm. It really
that
does
really
feel like a
me
mockery.
when people
I finna be in the pit.
Oh my god, do not get me started. Or like in middle school when like white boys would wear do-rags. What are you protecting?
It was just embarrassing to see too, because it's
hairs.
Like you didn't put any thought into it. Mm-hmm. Like there's no.
Are you not embarrassed? Are we not embarrassed right now?
It really is like they just see it as like a costume. Like people don't realize that's someone's culture.
Yeah.
That's who they are. It's not just something we just put on our heads. So
yeah.
Or like when other people use swaggy to refer to black people, that hurts me to my core every time I hear that. Like
I personally have never heard that. I'm thankful I've never heard that before.
It just sucks sometimes because like they're like, oh, like I want to act this way, I want to be this way, but they don't really want to be us. Mm-hmm. You know, they like look down upon us and they belittle us. And I feel like another thing I want to talk about is like just growing up here differently and like trying to fit into the American beauty standards. And then don't even get me started with colorism, which that is still very apparent back home. I was actually talking to my parents about this the other day because my dad's from Somalia, like I said, and my mom's from Kenya. And Kenyan people are like a lot more darker skinned than Somalian people. Somalians are like more light skinned, so like my dad's side of the family are like a lot lighter than I am. And then the other day, I believe my mom was telling me how like a tier list of like the most beautiful women in Africa were like ranked, and like all the lighter African countries were first. And my mom was just like, colorism is so apparent. Mm-hmm. And because my dad is from that culture, he's like, no, it's not. They're just beautiful. I was just like, okay, okay, Dad.
I think another interesting thing is just like America. And just like, also, I'm sure this happens outside of just the U.S., but how black people are referred to, I think more specifically black women are referred to quite differently than, say, like a white woman. If you look at foundation shades, first off, the range is never enough. The most, like, even now, even after, like, Rihanna released Fenty and had her huge, 46 shades or something more than that, companies are still releasing, like, 20 white shades and 5 chocolate mocha. Like, they're all
about the names for those.
They're all food-based.
My foundation shade that I'm wearing currently is caramel 10.5.
It's not my caramel macchiato, girl. Like my dark skin cocoa butter.
Like it's just why
hot chocolate
is that
cream.
so hard? Why is it so connected to just like?
It's just.
I can tell you, it's because black women and then also Latinas see this a lot too, where their race and gender is sexualized, where it's like
Middle Eastern women as well.
Middle Eastern women as well. Black women, especially and I'll just talk about black women because that's the one I know the best. Like that flavor of sexualization is more like, because black people, like the thing is we're aggressive. That's the stereotype. And so black women are always kind of painted in media to be like a sultry, almost, how do I say it? Like seductress, I guess you could say. And so like, oh, that dark chocolate queen. Like it's just
my stallion.
Exactly. Exactly. It's always like, ooh, you're so powerful and stuff like that. And sometimes it is meant to be a compliment, but when you really think about like the subtext behind that, it's like, why can't I just be pretty? Why can't you just say you look pretty?
And I saw a thing, it was a TikTok where this black woman was talking about how brunette can be used for black women, but it's not. It's used to describe white people with brown hair. And that's like,
I mean, you think about it. When you think of a brunette, you probably
think
think
of
of a
a
white lady with brown hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But brunettes exist in all cultures. So do redheads, and so do blondes.
Blondes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's crazy how I don't this isn't I don't know how to phrase this. I think I told you this before. Once when I was younger, I saw a black lady with blonde hair, and I remember thinking, that's not possible. How'd she get blonde hair?
You did tell
It was bleach. I can tell now. But there are parts of Africa where there's black people who, it's not albinism, because they have like black skin, but their hair is naturally blonde.
It's just genetics.
And it's
babe.
just, it's just genetics.
It's
The Punnett
just
squares.
Yeah.
Literally, I mean, like some black people have blue eyes.
Yeah, they do,
I mean,
naturally.
like, it's just like,
I think that's so pretty.
like, lighter
the
colored
contrast is so
eyes.
nice.
yeah.
But yeah, there's just a natural perception of like what brunette is, and then
Yeah.
what black people are.
Especially because brunette is like a beauty standard thing.
Yeah.
Blue
She's a
eyes,
thin,
too.
It's also
Blonde
That's
brunette
standard.
with green eyes.
You know what else is, I remember growing up, which I mean, like, now looking at it, I don't really, okay, I don't have, well, how am I going to word this? A lot of the physical attributes that black women have is masculinized?
Yes.
Is that the word?
Masculinized. Sure. That
Yes.
works.
And I remember just, like, growing up and just, like, disliking myself
Mhm.
because of that. Because, like, especially on social media, like, when a black woman, we have, like, not more masculine, I don't want to say masculine, but, like, our attributes are different than,
They're
like,
just different
the
from
beauty
European
standard.
white beauty standards.
Yeah, the white beauty standard. And because of that, I see this a lot on social media when, like, a black woman will, like, post themselves, and then people will be like, oh, are they trans?
Oh my god. Dude, you don't know how hard that hit me, because literally that's something I've been struggling with so much, like the not feeling feminine just because we're black women, and black women are like, I love Serena Williams,
I love her.
the tennis player, but if you go to any picture of her on the internet, any video of her, in the comments you will 100% see, first of all, horrible comments about like
She gets so much
comparing her to animals, but then also people just assuming that she is like a man, or that she took steroids because
She's
has
literally
That
just-
makes me so mad, because even, like, any dark-skinned woman who has, like, any sort of
shoulders.
fame,
Or-
or, like, it's just built like how a dark-skinned woman is, it just makes me so mad, because you'll always see a light-skinned woman who might look exactly the same as her, but they'll get so much more praise.
And it's really black women who really get the harshest of like the looks like a man comments. Like, oh my goodness.
It's just
I remember
'cause
just
I'm
in
sorry.
school being like, I'd wear like just like a sweatsuit. Do you remember, like, I don't know if you ever shopped at Target in like the early 2010s.
I think I know what you're talking about.
They would have these sweatsuits that came in a bunch of different colors and stuff, and I had like one that was like gray with, I think, like silver stars on it.
Yeah.
And I wore that to school, and I remember people telling me like, that doesn't look very girly, and then it's like, I remember specifically a guy said that doesn't look very girly, and my friend whom I care about, and she's, you know, a good person, all that stuff, but she turned to him and said, well, it suits her, and it just
Like,
it just
what do you
didn't
mean
feel
by
right.
that?
Yeah.
It's just like I've always struggled with being like a girly girl. Like, I hit a tomboy phase hard because I'm like, well, I guess this is what I have to be.
I can definitely relate to that, because as a Persian, I have a lot of body hair, and as a kid, people would be like, "Why do you have so much like hair?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" So actually, that actually led me to start like shaving my legs when I was like 10 years old, which
That's
is like
crazy.
Which is so
it's so
sad.
sad.
It's so sad.
It's so sad that like I got bullied into doing that
Yeah.
at such a young age. It's just like, why? Why are kids so mean? I don't know.
It's because they're
Social media,
parents
the way that they're
At that
teaching,
time,
raised.
there wasn't social media.
It's
so
way
it
that they're
mostly comes
raised.
from their
It's
parents.
Right
and
now,
also just
It's social media.
they just
Yeah.
they're white. They look at their arm. They don't have a lot of hair. They look at
Yeah.
your arm and they see, oh, that's different from me. That's weird.
Because
And I
also the
think a lot of
majority.
people, when they see something different, and this can go back. You can generalize this, or you can talk about individual levels. When they see something different, it's scary. It's spooky. It's abnormal, and it's not acceptable. But it is acceptable because you're another human being. And
Yeah.
hair's natural. I think that's part of the nice thing about, in recent years, a lot of people have been pushing like body hair is okay.
Yeah.
I think beginning like 2019, a lot of women were they stopped shaving their armpits.
Period.
Because
It's normal.
Right. And if
Yeah.
anything, it should be your choice whether or not you want to shave.
Mhm.
Like, me personally, unless I'm going somewhere real nice,
You will not catch me.
you will not catch me. Like,
I don't get the time.
I didn't start. Shaved as a woman in middle school, but that wasn't because like I wanted to. Really, it was more so that my mom was like,
You need to.
"You have armpit hair. You should start shaving." And then also I'd wear shorts for PE. I didn't wear shorts in middle school very often, just in PE. And I was like, I have leg hair. I gotta shave it. And it's such a hassle. Oh
It
my
is.
god!
You know
Like
what?
it feels nice because it's smooth, and going under your blankets for the first time is like, oh my god.
That's such a great feeling.
That's the only good thing.
Experience.
And then after that, if you don't do it right, you get bumps on your leg. I have so many cuts. I don't even shave. I haven't
You have
shaved
to
my
get the
legs
right-
in like a
The
year.
right razor.
I had good
Nair
razors.
squad. Unite.
You know what, though? You saying shorts. Getting back to, like, race stuff, being tan and getting tanned was such, like, a problem for so many people that I knew. Like, I would have, I mean, when I was in elementary school, I had just moved to a new school. Again, I was, like, the only black person there for,
This
like,
is our school?
Nelda, yes.
Okay.
I was, like, the only black person there for a long time, I think, until I met and so
Was she not there till like? I thought she was in the beginning.
I didn't meet her.
But separate classes.
yeah,
Right.
And so I had a lot of white friends and Asian friends, and especially like my white friends, and almost to a worse degree my Asian friends, when they got tanned, it was such a problem, it was such an issue. They hated being so dark. And I never understood that as a naturally dark person. Like my favorite thing back when I used to go outside, my favorite thing was laying on the beach because I don't really like swimming and just letting myself get as dark as possible because that's
Yeah,
what
that's
I
so
was
cool
taught
with
was
that,
beautiful. And then, but in other cultures, in other households, like being dark in any way, shape, or form is a problem. I mean, I know for a fact in the Philippines, they literally have commercials for skin bleaching lotions and stuff,
Yeah.
and that is
Yeah.
crazy
In a lot of
to me.
third world countries, actually. I know even in Africa, there's a lot of that. But funny that you brought that up because there was this specific time when I was with my dad's side of the family and we went to Hawaii together. And, because they are Somalian, they're like lighter than me. And I remember we went to the beach and my cousin was like, ugh, I don't want to get dark. Like, I'm already so dark enough. And meanwhile, she's like light skin. So I'm just like here. I'm just like, so you don't want to be like me? And I just remember feeling so bad about myself after that.
And it's weird because that problem stemmed from. I mean, I'm sure there's
It's
still things like that.
colorism,
It's
point blank
colorism, but
period.
it like in Asia, it started because the field workers would get dark because they're the ones working out, and then the rich people, the monarchy and all that stuff, they'd be
It's
inside.
just-
So it was a
yeah.
beauty standard for them to be as pale as possible, and I'm sure they did a lot of bleaching things back then with whatever, and now it's still a thing today. So it's kind of weird thinking hundreds of years later that's still affecting us just because people didn't let it go and parents taught their children and those children grew up and taught their children, and it just kept going on and on and on. And then also with the spread of like European beauty standards, more people would be like, I gotta look white. That's why people with monolids are told that that's ugly and not it's your eyeball. And I understand, like I'm not laughing at people who are self-conscious about that because they're taught that, but it's unfortunate that they were taught that.
Beauty standards in general are wild. I mean, especially in the United States where it's like people are just cutting up magazines and putting the different parts together and being like, yep, that's a new beauty standard. Because with other countries that are like mono-ethnic, it's pretty simple. In Korea, they have like the K-pop idols. That's the beauty standard. Everyone wants to look like that.
That's also really unhealthy.
It is. I'm not saying it is.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it is healthy. I'm just saying that it's just that. It's all. That's just all that. But in America, since we have so many different types of cultures, we have white women who will wear braids, who will have BBLs and big
Lip
lips,
fillers,
but then also
boob jobs.
but the braids will be blonde and they'll have nails that are like traditionally like Douyin or Chinese Korean like Asian style.
Or they'll have nails that are like this long.
They'll have the nails and stuff, and it's really weird how whoever
Pick and choose.
society has picks and chooses which things count as beautiful, and then we see as they fall out of fashion. Like I remember when during the, I want to say 2013 to like 2016, I was on Tumblr. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
God, those were the skinny era. Those were the skinny years, right before thick became a thing.
Oh my god, with like the thigh gaps and everything.
Right.
Oh my god,
and
that was so weird.
It's so wild having lived through that transition from watching girls like go from one eating disorder to another to try to fit the different beauty standards. It's really crazy, and it's like they're all based on different natural bodies of different cultures, but at the same time they don't want to find those cultures beautiful, which is what's crazy to me. It's not like black people became more popular or people were more attracted to black people during the thick years. It's just that those attributes is what they want to see on white women.
Right.
That's completely true.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how much that's ingrained into us as children. I remember being 4th grade at the oldest, and I was literally sitting down in my car driving, or not the one driving, I was in the backseat. I was whipping it in 4th grade, guys. But I remember seeing like another girl walking outside on the sidewalk, and she had like thin legs, and that's just probably her natural body. But I remember looking down at my thighs and thinking like, they're huge, like they're like I don't want this. And literally, I'm sitting down. When you sit down, your thigh is gonna spread out. That's just how your body works. And so many people are against that, and it's unfortunate because
that's just how people's bodies are, and the demonization of people's bodies is just this. It will never be like there's never gonna be a good version of that. Like there's no.
Objectification of women is never going to stop.
Objectification is never going to stop, and objectification is never good. That's, I guess, what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, I don't care what anyone says. My hot take for the day. Objectification is
actually
never
has
good.
its benefits. That was sarcastic.
Right, it was
Don't
sarcastic.
come after me. Please.
Let's all cancel Dive.
No!
Canceling Dive.
We've all been canceled at one point.
We're just offs now.
Right.
Oh my god, we have to have a Try Guys situation.
Eventually.
Basically, Dime is now out.
Bye.
We're recruiting another. What's your last name? B? Yes, we're recruiting another B. Right now
we're taking
ops.
applications.
We could be tops.
Comment down below to replace me. I get to choose who.
Anyway.
Well,
I think.
Thank you guys for joining in this conversation that stuck with about what were we talking about? Immigration. Not immigration.
Well, we were talking
being
about,
a
like,
first generation
Yeah.
American.
Mm-hmm.
The social aspects of growing up in America. It's been very nice.
Did you have a message that you wanted to share to us and then also to the audience?
like a moral.
Moral of the story is, like Bria said, objectification is not good. Stop.
That's the only thing.
That's the only thing that we got from this. Actually, no.
Work
You could be
on
like,
fixing
growing up-
yourself.
Growing up in America is hard. I feel like for everybody, especially with the different now, especially nowadays. At least before, when we were growing up, there wasn't social media.
And TikTok.
But now that there is social media, I feel like it's a lot harder because now you're going to be comparing yourself to all these people. Actually, hot take. I feel like we weren't supposed to see that many hot people in a day now. You know, like with social media, like we're constantly seeing beautiful people.
There goes the
And now we're like,
just going on.
you're just comparing yourself to other people.
Yeah.
Which
So
sucks.
don't do that.
Don't do that. You are beautiful in your own body and your own skin. Beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. What one person may think is hot might not be hot to another person.
Right.
So, you know, confidence is key. At the end of the day, if you're a mean person, you're going to be ugly. So,
Period. All right. You want to take us out? Thank the studio.
thank you guys for watching this episode of the BOPS podcast. We are now signing off from the Solano Community College Film Studio.
Alright.
Cut.
Okay.
You want to do that in sync?
That was not
Okay, wait.